So you've got the word red printed in green, the word blue printed in brown, and so on. And it turns out to be enormously difficult for people to do something which would appear to be very simple, such as naming the ink in which the word is printed. And the reason for that is, if you're a skilled reader of English, you can't help but read red or blue or brown or yellow, and that interferes with the process of naming the color. It's done automatically, even though you're not intending to do it, you don't want to do it, you wish you weren't doing it because you're screwing up the experimenter task or whatever, but still you just can't help it because it's performed automatically. Just so you know, that's how the Stroop effect goes, and you'll see that all later. Okay, so what have we got? Again, we've got this relationship between attention and automaticity that Kahneman was the first person to draw our attention to. Again, we begin with the identification of consciousness with attention. So if we talk about pre-conscious processing, we're meaning pre-attentive processing. That is to say, processing that doesn't require any kind of attention. And you'll remember that according to the early selection theories of attention and information processing, that pre-attentive processing was confined to the perceptual analysis of the physical features of stimuli. The late processing theories argued that pre-attentive processing could extend to the semantic features or the meaning of stimuli as well. When Kahneman redefined attention as mental effort, what he said was, look, automatic processes are performed pre-consciously or pre-attentively. So you can do lots of things pre-attentively or pre-consciously so long as they have been automatized. And some processes are innately automatic, like feature detection. Other processes are acquired through extensive practice, like reading in a language that you're familiar with. But it doesn't really matter how you become automatic. What matters is whether you're automatic. If your process is automatic, if your process is performed automatically, then it is performed unconsciously or pre-attentively. Okay, so that brings us to our formal definition of an automatic process, a definition that is nicely captured by a paper by John Barge, now at Yale University, called The Four Horsemen of Automaticity. Barge has a predilection for clever titles. He's a very good writer. But the point of that title is that there are four basic properties of an automatic process. The first of these is that an automatic process is inevitably evoked by the appearance in the environment of an effective stimulus. When you see the word R-E-D, you can't help but read the word red. Okay, it's automatically, it's inevitably evoked by the appearance of that stimulus. The second property of an automatic process is what we call incorrigible completion, which means that once an automatic process is set in motion, it has to run off to its completion. You can't really stop it from happening. Sometimes theorists use the metaphor of a ballistic missile, which once you shoot it, it's going to go where it's been aimed. There's really nothing you can do about it getting there. Okay? Inevitable evocation, and once evoked, incorrigible completion. The third property, classic property, I'll get to you in a second. The third classic property of an automatic process is what we mean by efficient execution. And what that means is an automatic process consumes no or very few cognitive resources. In pure black and white, automatic processes don't consume any cognitive resources, okay? And that leads to the fourth canonical property of an automatic process, which is that automatic processes can be deployed in parallel and don't interfere with other ongoing cognitive activities. Why don't automatic processes interfere with other ongoing cognitive activities? Because they don't consume any attentional resources, okay? The one property basically follows from the others, so that you can do lots of things at once, lots of things in parallel, so long as none of those processes demand anything by way of cognitive resources. Put those four properties together, and you discover that automatic processes are unconscious processes in what I call the strict sense of the term, because first, automatic processes are performed outside of conscious awareness. When you read, you're not aware of decoding that grapheme into a C and then an A and then a T and putting it all together. You're not aware of doing any of that activity. So automatic processes are unconscious because they operate outside of conscious awareness, but also automatic processes are unconscious because they operate outside or independent of conscious control. Yes?
What if you, before number 2, what if you have two, opposing applications?
Okay, we're going to get to that in just a second, okay? Because even so, you may not be able to control what's going on. Okay, that's the beauty of an automatic process. Now, I'm aware that ballistic missiles can be shot down by carefully aimed rockets, but that doesn't happen all that often, it turns out. And besides, they didn't know anything about that in 1975, okay? But you kind of get this idea of this process being launched and just kind of running off incorrigibly to completion. Anything else? Okay, so that's basically the idea here. In the subsequent years, the concept of automaticity was expanded to some extent, especially by two investigators, Lynn Hasher and Rose Zaks, who agreed with the four canonical properties: inevitable evocation, incorrigible completion, efficient execution, and so on. But they also added other features that are associated with automaticity. The first of these is, if you've got an automatic process, there's no improvement in that process with further training or practice or feedback. And the reason for that is, it's already perfect, right? You read C-A-T and it's cat. You can't get better at that. Okay? There's just nothing you can do to make yourself a better reader of the word cat. The second feature that Hasher and Zaks attributed to an automatic process is that within normal limits, there are no individual differences in the performance of an automatic process. If you're a reasonably skilled reader, then you're going to be subject to the Stroop effect. If you're a really skilled reader, you're still subject to the Stroop effect. If you're just kind of an ordinary skilled reader, you're still subject to the Stroop effect. The third property that they postulated was age invariance. That is, within normal limits, if you're not too young, infants don't show the Stroop effect because they don't know what red is, or at least they don't know what the word is. And maybe people with Alzheimer's disease might not show the Stroop effect, but within that broad range of normal ages, ordinary ages, there's going to be no variability. And the last of these, which they postulated, not so sure about, is that automatic processing is essentially independent of arousal level. As long as you're awake, you're going to do it, okay? If you're not awake, you're probably not going to do it, but basically, again, within this wide range of different levels of arousal, they're not going to affect automatic processes. If you think about this for a second, these are all variants on this idea of inevitable evocation and efficient execution. That is to say, nothing gets in the way of an automatic process. That's basically just kind of how things are. But there's controversy about this, about these kinds of properties, but there's basically no controversy about those four canonical properties: inevitable evocation, incorrigible completion, efficient execution, and parallel processing. Those are basically how you would identify an automatic process if you see it. And if you think about this for a second, you can see kind of where the idea of automaticity comes from. First, there are some kinds of behaviors that are innately automatic. Reflexes, physiological reflexes like the patellar reflex are innately automatic. Behavioral taxis, like moths flying towards a light. They can't help it. That's how they're built, right? Or even more complicated activities like the zigzag mating dance of the stickleback fish. They can't help doing that either. If there are various cues in the environment, that's just what they do. In the early literature on animal and human learning, for example, classical and instrumental conditioning were also thought of as things as processes that occurred automatically. And basically, there are lots of now in the skill learning literature, we know that there are lots and lots and lots of skills that can become automatized simply through practice. There's that famous so-called 10,000-hour rule. If you really, really, really want to get good at some skill, you got to work at it for about 10,000 hours. And if you work at it for about 10,000 hours, you'll get very good at it. If you look at any skilled musician, for example, you find out that before they got skilled, it took about 10,000 hours, right? And if you're a skilled musician, you look back on your own training, you'll see that it took you about 10,000 hours as well. And there's also this general idea that once something has been automatized, you really can't overcome it. I think that's going to get back to your question here. That we think might be a little bit controversial. I think that's not necessarily been put to the test yet. Okay, so the legacy of Kahneman's cutting through this debate between early selection and late selection theories of attention was the development and emergence of a whole class of so-called dual process theories in psychology, which are very, very, very popular in social psychology, but also popular in plain old cognitive psychology as well. And all of these dual process theories, everybody's theory is a little bit different. There's this funny thing about scientists. Larry Squire used to say that scientists would rather use another scientist's toothbrush than use his vocabulary. And there's something to that, I think. So everybody's got a kind of slightly different take on these things. But everybody agrees that various tasks can be performed in one of two ways, okay? Either consciously or unconsciously, either in a controlled or an automatic fashion. So that one of these processes in every dual process theory is something that is characterized as controlled or effortful or conscious, drawing on cognitive capacity in various ways. And these controlled processes are generally captured by various kinds of rules, and as I said before, they're performed consciously in various ways, which is to say that they're optional. You can do them or not do them depending on what your intention is. And while you're performing a controlled task, you're aware of what you're doing. You're basically